the game could be here was part of that conversation. And so that's what we did yesterday. We had 2 great sessions yesterday. And today we're going to have Jamin doing Fez with Phil, and Jane's going to do the KISS controller. And the developers are in the room for both games. So we hope to have enough time to have a great discussion among the audience and the developers and the speakers. So without further ado,
my name is Jamin Warren. I run a video game arts and culture company called Killscreen, magazine, run a website, amongst other things. And Phil, maybe you can give your...
I'm Phil Fish. I run a video game studio called Polytron, and we're working on Fez.
All right. This works out really well because as a reporter, a former reporter, much like actors, I don't have a lot of personal opinions, and so I have to have other people kind of fill in things for me. So this works out really well for me personally. So I thought to do something a little bit different for my Well Played. We thought that we would walk through sort of the beginning of Fez.
We're just going to play Fez.
We're just going to play. Yeah, I'm just going to put them right down.
Actually,
we're doing a speed run. We're doing a speed run of Fez. So spoiler alert.
yeah, spoiler alert. Seriously, if you don't want to have anything spoiled, you will.
The first 10 minutes ruined for you forever. Part of the reason I wanted to do that is I think in part, Fez is a game. There's a lot of expectation.
Fez is a game.
Fez is a game. It's still a game. But I think a lot of times, the way we think about games is influenced by a lot of things that have nothing to do with the game at all, in the sense that there's expectations that we have when we hear about Fez. I was in Luxembourg.
La-di-da.
Maybe like 4 years ago. And so Luxembourg was a city that, it was a military city, and no one was ever allowed to paint Luxembourg. And so what painters would do, they were allowed to look at sort of the Luxembourg city, the capital, and they'd have to come back from there and then paint their memories of it. And as a result, all these pictures of Luxembourg City are just beautiful, romantic, and majestic, in part because people carry those memories away. And in some ways, I think for games that we wait a long time for, we sort of create the sort of same types of expectations, etc. But without further ado, because I know this session is already starting to get to it, let's start. The title sequence I wanted to ask you about, because it seems like title sequences that's the first thing that you're going to see. What was the thought process for you guys in terms of...
Well, we had to show all the logos.
You had to show the letters.
We have to show ESRB and all that stuff. Well, we just tried to keep it simple. Actually, is there sound? Yeah. Okay. Let's just get to it. It's just
I mean, one of the questions I had was in terms of how did you guys make the decision from an art style standpoint in terms of we want Fez to be a game, because it seems like one of the things that you do is there's definitely a pastiche effect there, right? Where you're doing some kind of more modern kind of textual stuff, and then there's the more traditional.
Well, it's pixel art, but it's kind of pixel art inspired. The pixel art aesthetic wasn't something that was there from the beginning. We didn't set out to make a nostalgic pixel art game. Pixel aesthetic kind of arose from the 2D, 3D basic idea of the game, where I figured if I take a square pixel and I extrapolate it into a cube, well then there's my whole game. There's my look, there's the philosophy, there's the aesthetic. And from there, the pixel art itself started taking kind of a squarish look. I don't do organic shapes. I try to not alias anything. It's all right, 90-degree angles everywhere. Because it was really all about this idea of a square actually being a cube.
One of the things you saw that sort of at the beginning, kind of that logo, the thin line logo. There was a great exhibition at MoMA a couple years ago. It was called Online, specifically on the use of lines in drawing. And I think that's one of the things in the context of games. We're often sort of tempted to think about things in sort of shaded patterns, but I think there's a lot of power there in terms of using single lines to keep meaning. So you'll see more of that.
Yeah, I mean, the world inside the game is very much like a classic video game pixel art thing. But everything that's kind of outside of that, I use a little bit edgier graphic design style, and so much of the game is about geometry and a point becoming a line, becoming a square, becoming a cube, becoming a hypercube, that kind of extrapolation. So yeah, simple lines, just lines. That's a pattern that's recurrent in the game. We're gonna see some of that now. So I didn't limit myself to only pixel art. I didn't use any kind of color palette restriction, and from time to time you get a kind of more vectory looking thing overlaid on top of the pixel art.
What were some of the maybe some of the non-game art references maybe you were using? I was thinking like Soul to Lit, for example.
Well, originally, like when I started fairly early on, I knew that the game was going to kind of have this open feel. I spent an entire weekend watching like every Miyazaki movie. Because that guy gets blue skies, he gets like, the air seems fresh in his movie. So I watch all these movies that have to do with things in the sky, which I love that. And you know, obviously there's a lot of video game influences, but I think a lot of it came from my graphic design background and not necessarily just video games. The kind of vector overlay that we do sometimes, it's there to kind of hint at a bigger reality that, you know, the whole story of the game is this 2D guy and thinks he lives in a 2D world, and then he realizes that the world is actually 3D. But with like the way light behaves and comes in at an angle sometimes, and the vector overlay, we're there to hint at an even higher reality above the dimension.
It's definitely one of the things that resonated with me in the beginning. There's a Philip K. Dick story about a man who sort of suspects that he can, if he turns around fast enough, he can sort of pull the world around him kind of like disappears. It's like there's nothing behind him, sort of.
Like the world isn't rendering fast enough. There's some of that. Like the world of Fez is very much a video game world. It runs on computer logic. So we got your Fez. Fez allows you to rotate.
The name Gomez for the character?
Yes.
What's it?
There's a naming convention. Well, actually, we tend not to name things in the game, but like the characters internally, everything has to have a Z in it because Z is the third axis, it's the depth axis. But, you know, there's a Z in the name.
I have been hoping it was of Hispanic origin.
I've always, actually, it comes from Gomez Adam, if you have to know. I always thought Gomez was badass name, and I wanted to... Oh no! What's happening? Oops.
So that's product placement for Killscreen, by the way. Pick it up first. Alright. So
That doesn't make any sense. What? This is slightly different.
So what was the inspiration in terms of like pulling that or hitting the hard restart or whatever in terms of, because you could have just started the game, right? I mean,
Well, we knew we wanted the game to start out as strictly in 2D. Like that first village that you just saw, you can't rotate at that point. Only when you get the Fez. Like now you have the Fez from the beginning. We wanted people to kind of get used to just the controls, kind of calibrate themselves, how far you can jump, how it feels, only in 2D before we threw in the 3D notion, because it's, you know, might be a bit much to wrap your head around. And we wanted to have people play that village environment twice, once in 2D and once in 3D.
That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you in terms of, that's one of the things that designers in the real world, whether it's industrial designers or architects, that they are often tasked with helping people reimagine physical space in a variety of ways, and that because we live in the physical world that lets you do that. I was curious what the challenges were for you guys in terms of creating that type of depth, or what is essentially it's flat, right? It's on a screen. It's not in 3D, so to speak. How does that hurt, or did you ever have a desire like, oh, we could sort of make this in the physical world, or if you look at architecture or other things that kind of inspire?
No, actually, pretty much all of it was made like in engine. That we have our own editor, and it works a little bit like Google SketchUp. It's all in 3D. Like you get to rotate the camera around, and you're building everything out. The the tiles you see are like blocks in the editor. It's very modular, and I kind of like extrude them and carve into them, and I paint the right type. Like I'll paint the orange block with the grass on top. And I just kind of look around it. I flatten it in 2D, and I have to consider everything working on 4 different sides. It was years of trial and error. Like the first 2 years of development, we thought we were in production. We thought we were putting levels in the bank, but really it was all prototyping, and we didn't realize it for some reason. It took a while before we could be honest with ourselves. Like nothing that we've done in 2 years is actually good. We've just been like feeling things out, figuring out what kind of level works and what kind doesn't. And at that point, in the next 3 years, I just got better at it eventually.
Is there ever like a tinge of regret that process took so long for you guys?
Yes. So by the time it comes out, it's 5 years. I'm 26. It's nearly a fifth of my life I've spent working on this game so far. And a lot of it you just work in isolation. You can't show it all the time. You don't get a lot of gratification or reward out of it. You just work your ass off for 5 years, and your entire life falls apart. You don't have any friends anymore.
I think that's for one of the things.
It's awesome.
For video game consumers, I find that the process of making games is really oblique in that I don't know that people necessarily understand why something would take 5 years, or what.
They're lazy. There's lazy developers.
mostly sleeping most of the time. Was there like a particular moment for you guys where you were able to crystallize what the actual idea for Fez was, like during development?
Well, the basic idea of like rotating this world and playing from a 2D perspective was always there. Originally, Fez was this other game that I was making with Sean McGrath, who's now working on Dyad, the kind of weird contemplative racing game. And it was his idea originally to have a 3D world that you would rotate. And we were collaborating together on that. It didn't get us very far. Like it was never got past like an early prototyping. But we had a kind of disagreement on the direction that we wanted to take the game in, and we just kind of had this falling out. And I ended up going my own way because after the fact, I had the whole like 3D pixel aesthetic idea that I really grew to be attached to. But it always started with that basic idea of exploring 3D spaces from 4 distinct 2D points of view. Then everything else kind of just organically grew from there.
So is the idea with the characters, when you talk to the characters in the town, they say things like, that looks like a cube, or that was really cool what just happened there. So is the idea that the characters in the town just don't understand that there's a 3-dimensional world out there?
If you'll notice, there's one side of the village where people are. It's kind of neat, and the other ones are like a little bit grimier and like unkempt because people won't go there. They're not even aware that there are other sides of the village. So that's why.
So who put that stuff on the other side of the village?
Who indeed?
You're dodging your question.
Yeah. That's kind of the story. There's not much of a story in Fez, but it's all kind of in the background, in the environment. You can piece together certain truths, and everything's kind of a big mystery as to why are these 2D people living in this 3D world? That doesn't make sense.
Right. So again, I'm thinking like influences for you guys. I mean, I remember reading like The Giver, for example, as a child, and there's a big reveal of that in terms of the world that you think actually exists, doesn't exist. Were there other non-game references that you were thinking about in terms of sort of a world that exists but you just can't see it?
That whole idea of like reality not being real it came in pretty late in development actually, and it was kind of a weird reflection of my own feelings of how I felt about my life at that point, which was non-existent. And the whole kind of theme of this universe growing unstable, which you can't see right now, but as you play through the game, like these black holes start opening everywhere, and the universe basically begins to fall apart. And that's why you're collecting these little cubes. They're very important for reasons that I don't want to get into now. But yeah, you kind of have to put the universe back together before it just completely collapses around you.
I mean, I suppose there could be like a didactic reading there. Like, the world's a lot bigger. I mean, is this your message to game designers that there's a bigger world out there to explore?
That's not like Oh yeah, I'm going to show you something special. So here's the map. There's 3D map. One thing that a lot of people don't know about Fez is that it's basically a Metroidvania. It's a huge, open, non-linear world that is structured a lot like the first Zelda, and that you can play it in any order. There's no critical path. That's why there aren't really any story beats for the game, because you can do it in any order you want. It's really all about just exploring this big world. So these are all the rooms that I've seen so far. I'm just going to do a little debug thing, show you the entire, the entire unlocked map, show you the size of the world.
Wow.
So that's the world of Fez. There's over 150 places split in. Yes, please, round of applause, come on.
That's one of my questions for you, like, as a game, because I hear game designers often talk about that, about how they don't want to give players, we're letting you do things in any order. Do you still, at the same time, I'm sure, I don't know, I guess if I designed a car, for example, you could drive it anywhere, but I'm sure if you just, took it to really boring places, I'd be kind of bummed. I mean, do you feel like that as a game designer, even though you're trying to give players a lot of choice, that you still feel like, oh, if you go to this place first, the game feels more... Do you have any preferences whatsoever?
No, everybody's going to get a completely different experience, just depending on which door they find first and which area. There's like five main areas that are like thematically different, and there's lots of sub-areas that also have different themes. And I had to design this world knowing that people could experience it one way or another. And it's not just an open world, it's kind of like an open design, and that it really is just a big place. I really wanted to go for a strong sense of place. There's quite a lot of backtracking in Fez on purpose, because I wanted to breed like familiarity with the environments. I wanted them to become places that you were accustomed to, that you knew well. Every area has different music, and a lot of the playtesting we've been doing, people will find an area that they really like the music in, and they'll just kind of stand there. They do nothing, and they just kind of take it in, and they watch the time of day go by, and just listen to music.
We're going to start because I'm going to make time for James. So we can go to. Yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like, do you have a favorite place in Fez along those lines? Place that you feel is your sanctuary, your home, kind of game?
Yes, there's one very, very secret room that you can only unlock once you've found absolutely everything in the game, so nobody's ever going to see it. But it has the
So is that intentional? I mean, if that's your favorite place,
Yeah.
are you deliberately hiding it from that? I mean,
It just became my favorite place. It was always their intention to have like that one really secret room, but there's just the most heartbreaking music in it, and it's just kind of one little island floating in space, and there's not much there, and it's just sad as fuck for some reason, and I love it.
Sure. I mean, I guess I'm of two minds about it, because at the same time, that the likelihood of me seeing that room apparently sounds very
Yep.
That's your special place.
Yeah, there's a lot, like half the content in Fez is secret or hidden. Most people won't see all the game, and I think all the best stuff, like the weirdest stuff, is all secret and really like put away, like complicated, hard to find. Because that's the whole game. It's exploration and discovery. That's our feedback loop. You go around exploring, then you find this weird secret door, and you figure out how to open it, and then you get this big wow moment when you get there. This looks completely different. It looks weird. Or it has some bizarre new behavior or something like that.
I can see you basically like hiding Christmas presents from your children, like the joys of the exploration.
It's
and
also
discovery. It'll mean a lot more if you go and find it. Okay, I think that's basically about it. Yeah, this is more or less where I want to stop. Thank you to Mr. Fish.
My pleasure.
We're going to turn it over to Jane and the kissing controller. Thank you.
Thank you very much.